Hi guys, something unbelievable is happening. White folks are finally coming clean. After decades of denial, deflection, and blame, the truth is surfacing. As their misconduct, lies, and hidden agendas are being exposed, some are finally admitting Black people were never the problem, because when the truth rises, excuses collapse. Let's talk about the great awakening that's shaking the system to its core.
I am trying to get real with myself and with other white people, and it is painful work. There's a whole lot of blame toward Black people for being the cause of how white people treat them, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. I decided to take a closer look at slavery, since that's such a big topic in the United States. There has been slavery all over the world forever, and all colors of people have enslaved other colors of people for as long as we know about. But the transatlantic slave trade, in which Europeans brought African and Caribbean Black people to the United States to be free labor in the new colonies before they were really the United States, is a whole different story of slavery. Slavery historically had to do with who won and who lost a war, who was convenient, who stumbled by at the wrong time, and so it wasn't specifically race-based. So why did these white Europeans choose Black people to enslave? Because their physical differences from whites made it easier to create lies that they were biologically inferior. They invented science to defend this. It was easier to make these people who looked so different from us less human. And that lie made it easier to justify torture, rape, family separation, and death on a massive scale. And it made them, quite frankly, easier to identify if they tried to escape. The legacy didn't disappear when slavery ended. Eugenics came along and fed the racial superiority notion of whiteness, and it influenced the Nazi narrative along with the racial one. It carried over into segregation, Jim Crow, housing, policing, incarceration, education, all of that. If we're ever going to fix what's broken, we need to get curious enough to name how it got broken in the first place. White people need to get curious so we can say no more, not on my watch.
Hi guys, welcome back to my space, and if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. For years, society painted Black people as the issue. The violent ones, the lazy ones, the troublemakers. Meanwhile, history hid who really caused the chaos, corruption, and distractions. Now videos, documents, and investigations are exposing the truth. From police brutality to political manipulation, the mask is falling off. And even some white Americans themselves are saying, we were wrong. We created the very problem we blame on Black people.
White people? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about our violence. White violence. No more deflecting, no more blaming everything on everybody else. Let's confront ourselves. White people in America, our history is so extremely violent. And instead of confronting that, we continue to blame other people for the issues and the problems in this country, instead of just taking ownership of our part to play in everything, which is a huge part. Can we stop scapegoating other groups of people, please, and just look at ourselves? White people, it's time to talk about it. Like, it's long past time. Getting rid of other groups of people in this country is not going to make this country better. It's not going to make your life better. It's not going to make you better. I think white people are so scared to talk about race and to talk about white violence and white supremacy because they don't want to connect themselves to it. We don't want to feel like we're a part of the problem. But unless you're acknowledging the reality of how the US, this country, runs, you are a part of the problem. I truly believe in my heart, in my soul, that if you're born a white person in this country or on this planet, but I'll just speak about this country, Part of that journey is to dismantle systems that have been built to oppress other people. The hard work of life is to confront yourself. How do I benefit from the way that things are? And how does my benefiting from those things harm other people? And instead of walking around with, 1,000-pound bag of shame on your back, consider it your responsibility to do that work. Consider it an opportunity that you are in the best possible position to make this world a better place by not accepting racist and prejudiced and oppressive systems for what they are and trying to contribute to changing them. Use the privilege that you have for good. I don't think that anybody can ever really love themselves without being honest about themselves, without being honest with themselves. And that work is painful and hard, but it's so worth it. White people, you don't have to consciously think that you're better than other people in order to contribute to harm against them. All it takes to contribute to harm is to stay silent and disengaged. White people, can we finally get this shit right? Can we finally take accountability? Can we finally look ourselves in the mirror and decide that this isn't good enough? We're not doing a good enough job. You aren't losing because somebody else is safe and cared for. You aren't losing because somebody different than you exists. White people, let's talk about it. Let's start having these conversations with ourselves and with each other. It's time.
Now, we see it online. White folks admitting what their ancestors and system did. Admitting to redlining, mass incarceration, stolen land, biased education, and economic oppression. They are realizing the American dream was built on black labor and pain. Some even confess we were taught to fear and hate black people, but it was all projection. The truth hurts, but it's long overdue.
You, as white people, are obligated to right wrongs that your ancestors did. White people want black people to stop talking about it and don't make me feel bad about myself and I'm not a bad person and yes, you are. If you don't want to hear it, too bad. The responsibility falls on your shoulders.
All right, I'm just going to break this down as clearly as I can. You are not owed anything because of the color of your skin, and I certainly don't owe you anything because of the color of mine. I've never owned a slave a day in my life, and you've never been one. Neither were our parents, neither were our grandparents. You have bought into the leftist lie that you are owed something because of the color of your skin because you cannot achieve it yourself. You have chosen to sacrifice your personal responsibility and your dignity, and that is not my problem, and I am under no obligation whatsoever to fund your sense of entitlement.
Instead of confronting the problems in their community, they immediately go to black people. You pivoting to black people. You understand what I'm saying? See, that's why I don't like to hear no talk from other groups, other immigrants. No, notice they didn't pivot to Hispanics. They didn't pivot to Asians. That's why all that people of color crap and all this other groups need to do this and that. No, they pivot immediately to black people. They didn't pivot to Africans. They didn't pivot to Caribbeans. Immediately pivot to us. That's what they do. They never want to confront their issues. And that alone, not confronting their issues, is what they're talking about. Their numbers. That's what's getting rid of your numbers, is you not confronting your issues. They were talking very, very greasy before this guy was captured. Now, since he's captured, all their conversation got different now. Trump was talking about radical left and all, but Trump was just going in about that. Right? Then they capture him and they like, oh, well, this is sad. I'm like, what I'm learning about, I have learned about that culture. They have a rule. It don't matter what horrific thing that they do, you do not openly condemn it. You don't. It don't matter who you do it to, who they do it to. And a lot of them like Charlie Kirk. I would think that they would really be just on the same energy. Why you turn the energy to black people when you should be turning it to your own community and say, wait a minute, hold on. What are we doing in this community? Why are we doing all this? It's no discussion.
So yesterday I posted a video giving a very basic definition in my own words of what white privilege is. And I kept it very brief and vague on purpose because I had a feeling people would start arguing in the comments, which they did. But I also thought it was super interesting how many people were commenting that I have white guilt, that I want to be black, and that I'm dying for the attention of the black community. First of all, yes, I have white guilt. You should too. Anyone who grows up with the knowledge that they have systematic advantages over other people just because of historical events and historical discrimination should feel a little guilty about that. Whether or not they contributed to that is a whole other thing, but you're reaping the benefits of it. People act like white guilt is something to be ashamed of, but if you use it in the right way and you use it to further reduce injustice, it's a good thing. And when people talk about systematic injustice and things like that, and they say, oh, everyone's equal, and this is happening in the comments, there's no racism anymore, everyone's equal, obviously don't understand what systematic means. And I'm going to give an anecdotal story just to really hit this on the head. I am white, and on both sides of my family, we do not have any massive generational wealth. My mom's father is the only one of my 4 grandparents who we got any sort of generational wealth inherited from. And 99% of the wealth that we inherited from my grandfather was from selling his house. My grandfather was born in 1926 in rural North Carolina, and he was a 6'3" white man with blue eyes. And other than being white, my grandfather didn't have that many privileges. He was one of like 7 children. His mom didn't even get to high school level education, and his dad never went to college. They were not privileged in most other ways that we define privilege, but he was a white male in a very, very racist country. What his whiteness allowed him to do was work his way through college. At the time, there were colleges that weren't accepting black people, and he was accepted to college as long as he could pay for it. And he ended up getting a law degree and becoming very successful. And again, never hoarded any significant wealth, but bought a house outside of Washington, D.C. in the 50s. In a neighborhood that was redlined. And actually, my mom, who was born in the 60s, remembers in the 70s when the first black family moved into their neighborhood, because it had literally been sectioned off and realtors would not sell to black families. And my mom, who is 58 years old, went to a year of segregated school. So for all of you saying, it was so long ago, everyone has equal rights now, get over it. My mom remembers when the first black student joined her class in the 70s in Alexandria, Virginia. In 2015, my grandfather died, and we sold his house that he bought for around $100,000 in the 50s, and we sold it for $1 million. That money was divided among his children, and my family was able to get out of a lot of debt, and it completely reset my ability to go to private versus public school, my ability to afford tutors, my ability to become the educated person that I am. And it was all really because I have a white grandfather. Let me finish. Had my grandfather been black and had all of the other skills and background that he had, he couldn't have gone to the schools that he went to, he wouldn't have been hired in the jobs that he was, and he couldn't have bought the house that he did, that, 65 years later, put his family out of debt. So if anyone tries to tell you it's not that deep, it really is that deep. It goes so far back. Any small privilege that a white person has is probably, to some degree, due to their whiteness. And if you are a white person who has roots in the South, you definitely should have white guilt, and you definitely should be doing the work to understand how your privilege affects the people around you and how you can help level the playing field. Because you, almost 100%, have an ancestor who owned black people. So yes, I have white guilt. Yes, I'm aware of my status as a white woman, and I'm aware of the parts of my identity that are privileged and the parts that aren't. But saying that you have a certain type of privilege doesn't mean that you have every privilege. It just means that that aspect of your identity is favored by society. So I can talk about being a white woman, and that makes me privileged. But if I talk about being a woman, that is actually a disadvantage in a lot of ways. And everyone tried to get all particular about these specific situations where a black person might have a privilege or a woman might have a privilege over a man. Those are isolated situations you're bringing up. We're talking about large-scale, mass, systematic issues. And it's a lot deeper than just, I felt racism as a white person at one point. Fine, yeah, all of us can experience what feels like discrimination based on race. But that doesn't mean that it's systematically affecting you and stopping you and your families from catching up. That's really what it is. Now, yeah, legally, black people and white people should have the same exact rights and privileges. But they're playing catch up. Because if my family, like I said, had been black, we would never have gotten out of debt in 2015. I would never have been able to afford the school that I went to and live the lifestyle that I'm living right now. And that's because of effects from over 70 years ago. So thanks for listening. And yeah, white guilt's okay.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. Most of the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence as well as many mass shootings are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
This is why people don't trust white people, because it is peak whiteness and colonizer behavior to demand civility for a man who denies others their humanity. That's the oppressor, and we do not need to sympathize or empathize with them. And don't get me wrong, because I long for a world where there is no violence in it. But until all of us are free, none of us are free. And violence is part of the equation because of the oppressor, not the oppressed. We need to understand that violence comes in many forms, and white people need to learn it most of all. And if none of that is enough to convince you, then how about the fact that Charlie Kirk said empathy is a made-up new age word that does harm, and that is the one directive of his that I am willing to honor.
White people can't gaslight me into thinking that black people are violent, when you have historically been the most violent across a whole nation. I'm not ever going to compare someone running in a corner store and robbing it because they live in a system inside of a neighborhood that you created so they fail, to you pulling out somebody's teeth and putting it in your mouth. Boiling babies, raping and unaliving people. If we're going to talk about violence, it starts with you. It will always start with you. I don't care about a carjacking. I don't care about a pew-pew. It starts with you. If we compare and contrast apples to oranges, you win every time at the most violent, vicious criminals. Without any without moral clause, morality, anything. Savages, I would say. Because I would never put nobody on a boat, packed, stacked high, and make them work for me for free. While I grape their women, take off the sexual parts of their men, also grape their children and sell them. I would never. So when we talking about violence, talk about that.
They want you to be scared of Iranian sleeper cells while white guys dress up like police officers, knock on lawmakers' doors, and shoot and kill them. The most dangerous group of people in the United States right now are white, MAGA, Christian nationalists.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. Most of the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence as well as many mass shootings are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
Oh good, I'm so glad that you brought this important topic up, because something I've always been curious about is if there are more white people who are being killed by police. And to be sure, there are. As you can see, with Black Americans being 13% of the population, they're disproportionately affected, but that is a lot of white people who are being killed by police. Why are you okay with it? Where are the white-led protests? Where are the white-led organizations speaking out against police brutality? Why are there not more white Americans joining with the advocacy that Black Americans are already doing to speak out against police brutality towards innocent people? And don't try to sell me on the line that it's because white people experience oppression every day, it's just that they're more stoic about handling it. Because despite what a lot of you think, I didn't just arrive yesterday. I was born and raised here, and I've noticed that collectively you have a very long history of rioting. Anytime you hear the whisper that the hair on a white person's head may have been harmed, even if that whisper was a total fabrication. You riot when your sports teams lose. You riot when your sports teams win. You even riot when a football coach loses their job because they were ignoring allegations of abuse. You pretty much riot anytime you perceive that you might be losing power. So it's not because you're meek and that you don't protest anytime you perceive injustice. So what is it?
There's 10 million crimes committed in the United States, and out of those 10 million, 7 million were committed by white people. Now, I know I just did this video, but I'm doing this again, especially for you. And then there were 2.6 million committed by people of color, and the rest were by other races. Let me break it down even better for you. I've got 10 million cookies, Iron, and I gave you 7 million of those cookies, and I only gave Joe 2 million of those cookies. Who's got more cookies, Iron? It's really simple math. We don't gotta try to make it complicated. It's really simple. And guess what? The government that provides you those numbers, they do it just that simple too.
White people can't gaslight me into thinking that black people are violent, when you have historically been the most violent across a whole nation. I'm not ever going to compare someone running in a corner store and robbing it because they live in a system inside of a neighborhood that you created so they fail, to you pulling out somebody's teeth and putting it in your mouth. Boiling babies, raping and unaliving people. If we're going to talk about violence, it starts with you. It will always start with you. I don't care about a carjacking. I don't care about a pew-pew. It starts with you. If we compare and contrast apples to oranges, you win every time at the most violent, vicious criminals. Without any moral, without moral clause, morality, anything. Savages, I would say. Because I would never put nobody on a boat, packed, stacked high, and make them work for me for free. While I grape their women, take off the sexual parts of their men, also grape their children and sell them. I would never. So when we talking about violence, talk about that. Talk about that.
The FBI stats we've been referencing, they only track arrests. They don't track prosecutions or convictions, not the time someone wasn't arrested at all, even though they should have been, and they certainly don't reflect wrongful arrests. They don't account for the traffic stops that turn into felony charges. They don't account for the warnings white men get or the vacations they're sent on after killing unarmed black and brown men while wearing a uniform. But if we actually charge white men the way we charge black and brown men, if we tracked all the violence they commit, especially the interpersonal, domestic, sexual, and politically motivated kind, white male violence would be off the charts, as you said. It would be innumerable at that point. And even with all that bias in their favor, white men account for nearly 2 times the arrests of any other race, for violent crimes specifically. And that's the whole point. The system doesn't just let them off. It builds the numbers to hide these violent crimes. And the media, they use words like manifesto, political violence, they focus on mental illness, or they try to humanize the person. They say he was well educated, he was a churchgoer, he was a family man, a pillar of his community. So it's not just what's missing from the data, it's the way everything else around it is designed to protect white men. And even with all of that working in their favor, they still top the charts for violent crimes and arrests. That should tell us everything that we need to know.
So one thing I think is interesting is I grew up in a small town, very rural, 3,500 people, 1 stoplight, primarily white, primarily conservative. There were a few Hispanic families, but no black people, no Asian descent, none of that. And I now live about 2 hours away in a metro area of more than 3 million people, obviously very diverse. And it's just interesting to me how strong racism can be. When you think about the idea that anytime I have looked up the county jail roster for my hometown, all white people, and primarily males. And it just goes to show that the people in my hometown, those who are afraid of or cast blame upon or hatred for, black and brown people, Asian people, anyone who doesn't look like them, right? And they think of where I live as like, oh, I would never go there. I would never go there if I didn't want to get unalived, like scary people and whatever, you know? And in reality, like, their neighbor is probably in jail for SAing their granddaughter. And you still support white people to the fullest extent. Like, it's...
So 4 white kids in Semi Valley, just outside of a theater, attacked a black kid. They're all teenagers. Now, none of the white kids knew this black kid that they attacked. They were just looking for someone to attack. Of course, somebody of color. Now, the video catches them saying racial slurs as they beat the shit out of this kid. And get this, it gets even crazier that one of the kids has a father who is in the police department in Semi Valley. Go figure, it's always the fucking kid of a policeman. So not only are these kids arrested for a hate crime, but also they are going after the parents. And this is the part that makes me so fucking happy. Because fucking parents that don't know that their fucking kids are racist need to fucking pay for that. Yeah, you need to reap the repercussions of your fucking kid because you're so fucking up your own ass that you can't even see your fucking kid is racist because you're probably racist too. So, yeah, I hope these fucking parents see some time in prison. I hope these parents get their fucking bank accounts wiped clean because of this fucking lawsuit that's coming after you. It's a fucking hate crime, and you're gonna pay.
Statistics don't lie, WhYte says. They say black people are the overwhelming majority in violent attacks? Really? I swear I just did a video about this yesterday! If you go to the FBI's website and pull up crime in the United States and break it down by demographics, you will get this table, which is how many people are convicted for a crime by race. And you'll notice down at the bottom it says violent crime, which is everything from moita to rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. It's all of those. And guess who's at the top? Because those are numbers, and you can see which number is biggest, right? But if you scroll over to a much smaller, easier to comprehend number, which is the percentages, you'll notice down there, it says 67% for white people and only 30% for black people. So you're right, statistics don't lie. You do. White people commit more crimes, more violent crimes in the United States than all other demographics put together.
There was a time in my life when I thought that gun reform was the answer to ending the mass that is a huge problem in America. And then I thought, you know what? Prohibition has never worked in this country. Since alcohol prohibition, since telling doctors they can no longer write pain medication to patients, and so then patients now go and get fentanyl off the street or buy something that seems to be actually even worse at a gas station. Well, I do still feel like some 20-year-old probably doesn't need a machine. I do think that that is not going to get rid of the problem. So then there was a time where I thought it's a mental health crisis, right? And I think we can all agree that these people do have mental health problems and that our country does have a mental health problem in general. Forgive me if you've seen this on the news, but I was listening to TV the other day when this recent one happened at the Catholic school in Minneapolis, and one of them brought up loneliness. You hear about the male loneliness epidemic, and ever since COVID, people are less connected. And again, something that probably does factor into some of these situations. But what I don't hear people talking about is the demographic of the people who commit these crimes. And of course there have been exceptions, but the vast majority of the people glorifying Columbine and taking part in these atrocities young white males. Young white males who usually fit the description of someone that would be categorized as an incel or involuntarily celibate. And again, I'm not like discovering this issue for the first time. I just don't think it's talked about enough that white men are the problem. They are in so many places and scenarios. But specifically, white men who aren't reaping the benefits of a society that is designed for them to succeed and be happy and flourish above everyone else, to be the breadwinners, the winners, the top of the food chain in America. And when some of those men are not given women and money and power and success on a silver platter as they've been promised, the unspoken promise that is painted in every picture around them, they get angry. They get angry at women. They get angry at Black people. They take it out on children to get the most attention that they possibly can and have their name uttered because they are nobodies and they will never have the charisma to be who they so desperately believe that they were born and entitled to be. So when we teach young men no is a complete sentence and that they aren't entitled to everyone and everything in the world and that they need to humble themselves and work for things and accept that they may not get everything they want, instead of telling them that they deserve everything for doing little to no work other than just existing in the body that they just got so lucky to be born in. We are reinforcing life-saving values. These conversations we have about consent and equity and equality aren't just pointless conversations pushed by radical liberals and woke people. Over time, these ideals and these conversations could save the life of a child or an innocent person in general from an incel who thinks they have not been awarded what they were put on this earth to have.
Black people never destroyed system. They survived it. Never created poverty. They endured it. Never promoted violence. They defend themselves from it. Every time Black people built something powerful, from Tulsa to Motown, it was torn down not by them, but by hate and envy. The truth, Black people have always been the foundation, not the problem. The misconduct exposed are economic manipulation, whereby stolen land, denied loans, blocked opportunities. Media distortion, painting Black communities as dangerous while ignoring systemic theft. Political hypocrisy, using race to divide voters, then blaming minorities for chaos. Cultural theft, copying Black creativity while disrespecting the culture. Every lie they told about Black people is boomeranging back with reshifts. Some white people are now saying, we are tired of pretending. Black people were never the problem. We built system of oppression, then blamed the victims. Others still resist, scared to face what their comfort was built on. But truth doesn't need permission. It is surfacing whether they like it or not. While they confess, Black people are awakening even stronger, understanding their global power, unity, and influence. From business to politics, media to culture, the narrative is flipping, and now Black excellence isn't waiting for validation, it's demanding accountability. The bigger lesson here, when the oppressed rise, the oppressor is forced to look in the mirror. The truth was never hidden, it was just ignored. What we are seeing now isn't guilt, it's exposure, because no system built on lies can stand forever. White folks are coming clean, not out of kindness, but because the evidence is undeniable. The world is realizing what Black people have said for generations. They were never threats. They were proof of resilience. Let this moment be a reminder that truth always finds its way out. Keep speaking, keep teaching, keep awakening, because when we arise, the world must adjust. Stay conscious, stay proud, stay powerful. Thank you for watching. This is Mercy Realities.